Thank you. Good afternoon. Today is March 15th, and this is the bill hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. First, we have House Bill 1398, Delegate Attar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members. In 2014, the General Assembly passed the Baltimore City Residential Retention Act by unanimous vote. This provides a real property tax credit to Baltimore City residents that received the homestead tax credit for the last 5 years and relocate to a newly purchased dwelling in Baltimore City. The tax credit is a fixed amount of $4,000 to be applied to the homeowner's property tax bill over a 5-year period. The bill took effect June 1st, 2014, and it ends June 30th, 2024. House Bill 1398 simply terminates the sunset. This tax credit has helped residents and has been a great incentive to keep Baltimore City residents in the city. It's a local Baltimore City bill and received a favorable report from the city delegation by a unanimous vote. I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Delegate Attar? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1398. Delegate Bartlett, House Bill 1399.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee, it's great to be here today. I'm here to present House Bill 1399, Delegate Sandy Bartlett for the record. House Bill 1399 increases the compensation of the members of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education by $10,000 each. The president would receive $20,000 annually under the bill, the members $19,000, and the student member $18,000 in a scholarship. The bill will take effect this July, and the bill is needed because our pay scale is so low. We have had a great deal of difficulty recruiting members to or individuals to run for office. So this would be a means of getting good recruits, good candidates, and strengthening the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. And I ask for a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Bartlett? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Bartlett. Next, calling House Bill 1416, a Charles County delegation bill that will be presented by Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Edith Patterson, and I'm presenting House Bill 1416. It's a delegation bill that is enabling legislation that would afford the Charles County Commissioners the authority to offer tax credit against the property tax imposed on the owner-occupied residence of certain emergency responders and their surviving spouses. This bill has been vetted by the county's public hearing and received a unanimous vote from the county commissioners and members of the Charles County delegation. I'm requesting a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Patterson? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1416. Now calling House Bill 1441, and Delegate Saab will be presenting an Anne Arundel County bill, if he is with us. Let's see if Delegate Saab is here. Not yet. Okay, one moment.
Madam Chair, Delegates Saab, Weibel, and Williams are all occupied right now. They should be here soon.
Okay. Okay, so let's move to Delegate Wilkins. House
Awesome.
Bill 1444.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and greetings to my fellow committee members as well as the Vice Chair. I, for the record, am Janelle Wilkins. I'm pleased to present HB 1444. What this bill is it simply repeals the sunset on a very important tax credit that supports our Maryland HBCUs. In 2018, the state started a tax credit program to incentivize donations to the endowments of our Maryland HBCUs, Bowie State, Coppin State, Morgan State, and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. The tax credit is managed by the Comptroller of Maryland and can be redeemed for donations to the HBCU endowments for 25% of the donation. The maximum total amount of all tax credits allotted is $240,000, and it's split between the 4 institutions. This tax credit is set to sunset next year, and HB 1444 would simply repeal the sunset. Although the tax credit has been successful, most of the time it's been implemented has been during COVID-19, which has been tough economic times for 3 out of the 4 years that it has been in place. So there have been over 121,000 credits that have been provided to the endowment of these donors via these tax credits, and I urge a passage favorably of HB 1444 to continue the successful tax credit in support of our Maryland HBCUs.
Thank you. Next, we will have Brent Swinton for 2 minutes, please.
Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity for me to offer comments in support of Bill 1444. I am Brent Swinton, and I serve as the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Bowie State University. I do applaud the bill sponsor, Delegate Wilkins, and the other sponsors for this legislation. It represents an opportunity to increase contributions to endowments to support and to continue to serve growth, the spur growth at historically Black colleges and universities, such as Bowie State University. This proposed legislation sunset repeal for endowment contributions to our institution. That would be a transformative situation, and annually we are always working hard to get scholarships for Bowie State University students. So this legislation is timely, it is critical, especially in light of recent situations caused by the pandemic and also enduring historical factors. So all of that is illustrated by the financial hardships that many of our families have experienced. At Bowie State, we implemented and extended financial aid plans and assistance to those families hardest hit due to the pandemic and the ensuing shutdown. And House Bill 1444 increases the ability to incentivize ongoing contributions to our endowment. So again, I just want to thank you on behalf of the 89% of our student body who requires some form of financial aid to keep this incentive going. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Buckle, question?
I just had a question. I think Delegate Wilkins answered it. So largely probably because of COVID-19 and the downtick in giving in general, the credit hasn't been fully subscribed. I guess we would say, from a revenue standpoint, it hasn't hit its maximum. But this sounds like a really good idea to help incentivize these institutions. So if we continue it out, is this completely removing the sunset, or is it just, I'd be okay with completely removing the sunset, or is it just extending it out for X number of years to give it a chance to look at its efficacy?
That's a great question. This bill completely removes it.
Good.
Because I think that it's something that it's worked really well. We hope it'll work even better in non-COVID years as our economy gets better and hopefully people give more. And I don't see a reason why we would want to repeal something like this. So the bill does completely repeal the sunset.
Good. I think that's the best way to do it too. I didn't know that, but that seems like the best way to do it. And it's a fairly small amount, but it might make a big difference to folks at universities that need it. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I can attest increasing usage of the tax credit year over year. So as more people learn about it, we are finding our constituents are using it.
Great.
There are questions. Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1444. Next, calling House Bill 1441, Delegate Saab.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies, I was still in subcommittee trying to work two computers. So thanks for giving me a little extra time. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Sid Saab, testifying House Bill 1441. This is probably going to be one of the simplest, easiest bill that this committee will probably deal with this session. And it's specific to Anne Arundel County. So by state law, Anne Arundel County has to replace its buses once they have been in service for 12 years, regardless of their condition. What this bill does, it allows them to go up to 15 years, and it gives them that flexibility. Many counties in Maryland have this flexibility, and we're just trying to add Anne Arundel County to that. So Calvert County, Caroline County, Cecil, Charles, Dorchester, Garrett County, Kent County, Queen Anne's, and St. Mary and Talbot, and a couple other, they all allow that flexibility. And what this bill specifically say that you can still have the flexibility up to 15 years unless the bus fails to meet the applicable school bus and motor vehicle safety standard. A school vehicle may be operated up to 15 years. So that's all it's really doing. This issue was brought to my attention by Councilman Amanda Fiedler. And this topic gets brought up almost every year in their budget discussion. And we believe that the school system would benefit greatly from having these 3 extra years. And I just want to point out that this will not reduce the school system budget because of maintenance of effort. All it does, it allows for them to be more efficient with taxpayers' money, and those funds can be used elsewhere. So it's a win-win for the school system and for the students. And according to the fiscal note, this bill does not materially affect state finances of operations and does not materially affect Anne Arundel County Public School finances. You will find in your mailbox a letter of support from County Councilwoman Fiedler. And I've also heard verbally from Anne Arundel County Public Schools Board that they will be meeting tomorrow, and they're recommending to support this bill. And with that, Madam Chairman, I request a favorable report on House Bill 1441. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Saab? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1441. Calling House Bill 1477, Delegate Weibel on a Washington County bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. It's good to be with you and the honorable members of Ways and Means Committee. House Bill 1477 is a local bill. So several years ago, we had a couple residents come to our Board of County Commissioners. They were not pleased with the manner in which their mobile homes were being taxed. So basically, it was a gross receipts tax on the monthly rental payment that they would make to a park owner. So at their request, we passed legislation, actually in this committee, which authorized mobile homes to be taxed the same as real property. So once the assessments came in, they weren't pleased with that method either. So basically, what this bill does is remove the language authorizing mobile homes to be taxed as real property, and it reinstates the authority of the Board of County Commissioners to tax them at a local gross receipts tax. Actually, what the commissioners did was they lowered the rate of the gross receipts tax. So now everyone seems to be pleased with the method of taxation. So that's it in a nutshell, and I ask for a favorable report.
Are there any questions for Delegate Weibel? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1477. Do we have Delegate Barnes with us? Okay. We will. I'm taking that as a no. So House Bill 1404. Calling Delegate Williams.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I apologize. I am in a Uber on the way to pick up my vehicle, but I am here to testify in favor of House Bill 1404, which is for curbside voting. This bill was heard by the committee last session. And what this bill does, it basically helps to implement the use of curbside voting here in the state of Maryland. This is a procedure where individuals who are physically unable to basically enter the polling place on their own because of a physical disability or a pregnancy or some other reason that they would provide to the State Board of Elections would allow them to simply pull up to a specific location that is located within their county where they could be able to vote from their vehicle. And so this bill is a little different than the version that was introduced last session, and that we did make some amendments based on some of the feedback that we did receive previously from the election, limiting it to just simply one location per county that would be designated by the State Board of Elections as well as the local Board of Elections, and also putting in an application process that the person would have to utilize if they wish to utilize this type of service. I know that there were some concerns that were raised by the National Federation of the Blind with regards to the type of ballots that would be used during this process, and we're willing to work with the National Federation of the Blind to address their concerns. This practice is something that's been used in a number of different states across the country, like Texas, Wisconsin, Virginia, as well as the state of North Carolina. And for all of those reasons, I asked for this committee to give a favorable report to House Bill 1404.
Okay, next, Monica Wiley for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Monica Wiley, and I respectfully come before you in support of HB 1404 Election Law Curbside Voting Establishment Bill. This bill is very personal for me. As a voter with a physical disability, I have an incomplete spinal cord injury due to a drunk driver tractor trailer accident that killed my entire family at the age of 9. I presently walk with a cane. I have experienced some challenges and barriers to voting. And as a former voter in Virginia, I saw the challenges that affected people with disabilities, the barriers that were in place in terms of people with disabilities having access to the voting ballot. And I remember during a gubernatorial election where I pulled up to my voting precinct, and not only was it very challenging in terms of getting to the polling location, but then the line was wrapped around the building. And I had to ask a voting election officer to stand in my place until I was next in line to vote. I felt very embarrassed, and I felt very disenfranchised and very unempowered. And so I vowed to work with members in Virginia, the elected officials in Virginia, to make sure that we make a more easier access for people with disabilities such as myself to be able to vote. And that also included women that were pregnant, because I saw the challenges that it affected them as well in terms of access to the voting ballot. And so we did this every year in Virginia, because every year in Virginia there were elections. And so we strive to make sure that that opportunity and that accessibility and accommodations were available for people with disabilities. Voting is the bedrock of our democracy. It is the freedom and the ability and independence to exercise our voice through voting without any challenges or barriers. And so proper access and accommodations to the voting process is critical, and it's very vital to advancing the rights, the fairness, the parity of people with disabilities. Now, as a resident of Maryland and as a voting representative or voting constituent in Maryland, I strongly urge this body to support the HB 1404 bill. I thank you for your attention.
So are there any questions for Ms. Wiley or for Delegate Williams? Okay, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill. This is something that I actually am very much in support of and have talked about in previous bills that I've brought to this committee. I have a question for you about how the people in the curbside voting line would need to self-disclose their disabilities, or would this be available to everyone?
They would not need to self-disclose the specifics of their disability, but they would need to put in a request to request this type of service. Is the way I think the language is currently in the bill, because there were concerns that were raised by the Board of Elections trying to make this available to everyone. So we modified the bill from its posture from last session to kind of address those concerns that were raised by the State Board of Elections. And so we'll start with this and see how it works if this bill so passes. And hopefully one day we can expand it to everyone. But there was a concern raised about just having enough election judges and things like that to be able to provide that on a larger scale.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. And this would be a request that they have to put in before the day of voting or at the poll?
It would have to be placed beforehand, or I believe the way the bill is written, I think they can also do it the day of.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Williams. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1404. Calling House Bill 1468, and Mr. Joshua Freeman from Delegate Barnes's office is here to present that bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of this esteemed committee. Again, my name is Joshua Freeman. I'm the Chief of Staff for Delegate Barnes, and I'll be introducing his bill, House Bill 1468. This bill expands the state subtraction modification for retired law enforcement, correctional officers, fire, rescue, and emergency services personnel by exempting up to $15,000 in eligible retirement income if the individual is at least 55 years of age. The subtraction modification is not reduced by the amount of Social Security benefits received and replaces the existing subtraction modification that can be claimed under current law. We ask support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Freeman? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1468. Thank you. Next, Delegate Patterson, House Bill 1472.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Amana Ali, an intern with Delegate Patterson's office, here to speak on House Bill 1472. House Bill 1472 is a piece of legislation that increases the amount that volunteer fire, rescue, and emergency services personnel can claim under the Maryland Tax Incentive Program, TIP. Currently, the TIP program deduction is $7,000, and this legislation would increase that deduction to $10,000, beginning with the 2023 tax year. Presently, professional firefighters and EMS personnel can claim a considerably higher deduction, $20K, and this legislation would bring the amount closer in line. As a result of COVID-19 pandemic, our first responders truly have faced challenges and dangers unlike they have ever seen. In the faces of these challenges, this bill will provide a very small tax benefit for these individuals who have encountered so many new and additional difficulties during this unprecedented time. Thank you for your time. I would ask you and the committee for a favorable report of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1472. And calling our
Madam Chair, I think there's a witness, Robert Phillips.
Sorry, calling Robert Phillips for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Robert Phillips. I'm the chairman of the MSFA Legislative Committee. It's Maryland State Firefighters Association. The MSFA is in full support of this bill. We represent the volunteer fire service in our state. We have about 340 fire companies and over 30,000 volunteers that we represent. These numbers sound very good and impressive. But the sad part is they are declining. Recruitment and retention of members is an increasing problem, and this income tax subtraction is a very important tool in our toolbox to carry out our recruitment and retention. As our members are volunteers and unpaid, this is one way for the state and local governments to say thank you for your service. I thank you for your attention to this bill and ask for your favorable report. Available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Phillips? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you, Delegate Patterson. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1472. One moment, please, committee, while we gather folks for this last bill. One moment.
Madam Chair, we can't hear you.
Yep, I was speaking with Sarah, but calling House Bill 1486, Delegate Johnson. But before we move into that, I just have a couple remarks. The state is fortunate to have a record budget surplus, but the after effects of the pandemic continue to strain family budgets. The gas tax holiday we are hearing today will provide quick savings to Marylanders facing rapidly rising gas prices. The House of Delegates is dedicated to working in a bipartisan manner with the governor and our colleagues in the Senate to use our budget surplus to provide additional needed relief to our constituents. I want to let the committee know that we have folks here from the Comptroller's Office. If you have any questions, they aren't testifying, but Justin Hayes and Chuck Ohm are in if there are questions at the end of all the witnesses. So thank you all for being here today. And Delegate Johnson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Steve Johnson, for the record, here to present House Bill 1486. This is a fairly simple and just a straightforward bill. As the chair has mentioned, we all heard a lot of concerns about the inflation, rising prices of everything, especially gas. Our colleagues on the floor have talked about the high price of gas several times. So this was something that was brought about a bill to provide some relief for our Maryland families, and the House leadership, the Senate leadership, and the governor's office all agreed that we needed to do something. So that's where we come up with House Bill 1486. It's a moratorium on the Maryland tax on gasoline for 30 days. Hopefully by then, we'll see what's going on with this Russia and Ukraine issue, where Russia has attacked Ukraine, and we're trying to wean ourselves off of Russian oil. And we heard on the floor today, diverse from Russian investments. So I think this is a step in the right direction on multiple levels. It's going to cost us about $100 million in a 30-day period, which we do have, thank goodness, the resources to absorb that and move forward. And my hope is that at the end of 30 days, we don't have to take a look at this and see if we need to do more. But for now, I would like a favorable report on House Bill 1486, and I will turn it over to my panel.
Thank you. And next, I don't have folks sign up in a particular order, so I'm just gonna call them as they've signed up. Michael Higgins, please, for 2 minutes. Was there a Michael Higgins?
It looks like they're trying to connect, they're having problems connecting.
Michael Sakata, please, for 2 minutes. Mr. Sakata? I see he is on. Okay, how about Marshall Kleinfelter for 2 minutes?
Yes, this is Marshall Kleinfelter. Thank you so very much. And thank you, Madam Chair Atterbury and Vice Chairman Washington and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Marshall Kleinfelter, President of Maryland Asphalt Association, where we applaud the concept of the motor fuel tax holiday as our companies and their fleets consume an enormous amount of fuel monthly in the order of 500,000 gallons per month. We are concerned that this precedent-setting action resulting in short-term gain will lead to long-term drain on our transportation system. MDOT's constricted budget will force them to look for ways to reduce their budget by shifting priorities. Unfortunately, the normal method of reducing expenditures is to reduce the money going to the maintenance of the roadways. Prior to COVID, approximately $246 million was used annually by the districts to maintain their roadways. During COVID, this was reduced to just $91 million. Since 2016, our remaining service life index, which is an index taking into consideration the serviceability of the roads, has dropped. And according to MDOT SHA asset management projection, there is a $5.6 billion spending gap over the next 10 years to meet their state of good repair on their transportation system. Safety should be our main concern. As reported by MDOT MVA, there were 555 fatalities that occurred in 518 crashes in Maryland in 2021. As Vice Chairman Washington, Dara Barnes, Nick Charles, Julian Ivey may know, the highest county was Prince George's with over 128 deaths in 2021. We are not taking good care of our roads and therefore our citizens. We need to do a better job of maintaining our roadways, and we will not be doing that by reducing the revenue coming into the Transportation Trust Fund. When we have the opportunity to resurface a roadway, our
Thank
members—
you. Can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes. Our ability to maintain the roads is decreased by House Bill 1486, and we need to continue the revenue coming into the Transportation Trust Fund. It will need to immediately backfilled in order to take care of the roads in Maryland. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Michael Sakata, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. And thank you for the opportunity to testify on HB 1486. For the record, my name is Mike Sakata, President and CEO of the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. And I'll be quick here. Let me begin by emphasizing that MTBA sympathizes with every Marylander who has been feeling the pain at the pump over the past several months. We understand, as well as anyone, the pressure that skyrocketing gas prices can put on a budget. And we would certainly support reasonable energy policy initiatives aimed at increasing our energy independence and decreasing the average cost of gas. At the same time, however, we are concerned that this push behind a gas tax holiday is myopic and it fails to consider alternative relief proposals that would have a greater impact on Marylanders, namely reducing the sales tax for a similar period of time. Based on the DLS data from last year, reducing a state sales tax would cost the state $62.5 million per percentage point per month. Thus, the proposal backed by MTBMA to cut Maryland sales tax by 4% for 1 month would cost approximately $125 million. In addition, targeting sales tax would expand the potential universe of residents and would benefit from this action. Estimates that 2 million drivers would benefit from gas tax holiday, saving only an average of $22 per person. On the other hand, 6 million Marylanders would benefit from a sales tax holiday. Cutting the gas tax only benefits people with cars. So the lower income residents of our urban regions who depend on mass transit to get around and who need the relief the most will gain nothing from the bill as is proposed. They would see the impact of a cut to the state sales tax. However, on the receipt of grocery store, every trip to the pharmacy, and every trip to the clothing store. In conclusion, I want to thank you for considering ways to provide relief to hardworking Marylanders through this time of runaway inflation and uncertain geopolitical futures. I simply ask that you rethink the wisdom of the bill as proposed and consider MPMA's alternative sales tax proposal. For these reasons, I respectfully request an unfavorable report on HB 1486. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, Megan Owings, please, for 2 minutes. I think Ms. Owings is having issues with her audio. So we will move, I'm Michael Higgins. Are you connected yet? Same problem. Okay, that is everyone that was signed up to testify. Questions? I see Delegate Ivy. You're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 years into the pandemic, still missing the unmute button. My questions for Delegate Johnson. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for bringing this piece of legislation, for your dedication towards helping working families across the state. Right now, in particular, of course, we're all experiencing the pain at the pump. So I want to thank you for bringing this innovative piece of legislation. My question was around the timeline, the time frame for this legislation taking place. I'm sure we've all been receiving calls from constituents, but if you could just, for the record, walk us through why this is a temporary piece of legislation rather than us permanently doing away with the gas tax or expanding it to 120-day gas tax, what is it, vacation. If you could just walk us through the thinking here.
Thank you, Delegate. I think it's because we have the president trying to work out that gas tax and the oil issue, that gasoline and oil issue with other countries, trying to get Saudi Arabia, some of the other countries to step up their production to veer away and ease the pain of weaning off of Russian oil. So we don't know where this Russian war is going to be in 30 days. And I think that it was prudent for us to take 30 days and then see where we are, see what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine war, and see what we've gotten worked out federally with our allies on oil, and just to see where we are, and then move forward there. Take a quick break, think it over, see where we're at, and then see what we need to do from there. But did that answer your question?
Absolutely, and we can always come back and look into this again, correct, sir?
Correct, yes. I think that was the whole thinking before the 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Lukey.
Thank you. I don't know if Mr. Sakata and Mr. Kleinfelter are still on and available to answer any questions. Mr. Sakata? Okay, well, I don't have any questions for the sponsor if he's the only one left on.
I don't see Mr. Sakata anymore. Okay, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a couple of questions. I appreciate Delegate Johnson, the intent of the bill. One question, you said, we don't know what's going to happen in the Ukraine. I pray to God that better things are going to happen and that the Ukrainians may be able to persevere and triumph, and maybe that will change some of this. But we're still probably not going to be buying Russian oil or getting Russian natural gas products that have some international effects for quite some time. And so when you say, hey, let's 30 days, let's take another look at extending it, unless my calendar's wrong, we won't be here in 30 days. So session will be over. So what would be the mechanism for the legislature to authorize a continuing sales tax holiday? Let's say we pass this and it gets to the governor's desk Friday of this week. That's the 17th, 18th of April. What would be the mechanism, or excuse me, of March, what would be the mechanism of how we would do this on April the 18th when session is over? If we say, hey, these terrible gas price inflation is still with us, how would you propose we do that? Would it maybe make more sense to extend it a little longer?
Well, Delegate, thank you for the question. I thought 30 days would be appropriate to take a look at it. And I did think about us ending the session. But then if it's a big enough issue, if we're in a position where we need to extend it further, we could always come back for a special session. And I don't know the rules about possibly voting pro forma session. So I'm not sure about exactly where we'll be in 30 days, but if it is an emergency, I'm sure we could come back if we had
I'm a big fan of the concept. I'd like to see it go a little bit longer. I want to be reasonable about it. But the only other question that I had was the complexities of how to make sure that this roughly 37 cents per gallon tax cut, tax holiday, actually bleeds through to the end consumer. Because I'm reading the bill, it's a very short bill, and it just says it's the intent of the General Assembly that the motor fuel tax-free period established shall be reflected in sales to consumers of gasoline and the other fuel products that are included. Do you have any insight, and maybe you don't, maybe that it would be a better question for some of the comptrollers people or folks who administer the program. How do we make sure that when we cut the tax for this 30 days, that it actually is directly reflected in the price of gasoline and isn't just something that the distributor or the gas station owner can say, well, I didn't have to pay the full tax, but because the price of oil or the price of gas keeps going up, I'm not really cutting it by 37 cents. Maybe I cut it a little bit, but I'm under no requirement to just knock off the 37 cents from my base price. How's that going to work?
Delegate, I'm going to leave that wisdom up to the comptroller's office. I know the gas stations cannot raise the price of fuel unless they had to pay an increased price of that fuel delivery. That's supposed to be the way it's set up now. So I'm not sure that they will have an option to leave their price the same and not take the tax off. So I'm going to leave that up to the comptroller's office, how he's going to handle it.
And I don't know, I think Delegate Lukey, I don't know if those people are still on here, if anybody else has an answer to it that's for informational purposes. But, before we vote on the floor, I think people would like to get a better sense of that. Because the worst thing we want to do is tell the public, hey, we're doing something that's going to cut your gas taxes. And then they show up at the pump the next week and they're like, well, I'm paying the same or more, or maybe a few cents less than what I paid last week. That really wasn't very effective. That creates a boomerang effect sort of in terms of how people view the system. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate your answers.
And Delegate, on your question about the 30 days, even if we extended it out further, we would still be out of session. So
we would. I just think we'd be buying ourselves some more time to hopefully, I don't think, frankly, I pray I'm wrong. I don't think anything's probably going to change in the next 30 days with the inflationary spiral and the global petroleum markets. I don't know if it'll change in 60 days, but I don't think it'll change much by April. At least that's what most experts are forecasting. And that's why I'd like to do all that we can. But thank you for bringing the bill and making it timely.
Thank you.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the minority leader for asking the one question that I did have. You handled that fairly well, Mr. Minority Leader. Secondly, consensus on the, concern for it not being long enough. It's, I think there's a lot of desire to see this 90 days, even if we tried to compromise at 60 or something, I think it'd be helpful. The third thing and a question on who can answer, there was some concern from some of the small business owners how this would play out. So if it is tax paid on fuel upon delivery, or is tax paid on fuel upon the time it's sold? Because some people are talking that they can see a situation where if it's paid on delivery, somebody may buy gas Sunday, a truckload, and another, it starts on Monday, they're buying fuel then. So one place is going to be stuck with 38-cent higher gas until that runs out. And then once the 30 days is over, if the tax is paid from delivery, they're going to have cheaper fuel lasting longer into it. So how is, tax paid on fuel? Is it at delivery or is it at sale? Does anybody have that answer? Hopefully the comptroller's office would.
Yeah, they just interrupted the comptroller. They were having some issues with their link, so it's being resent to them now. So hopefully they should be on momentarily.
Madam Chair, I can respond to that if you'd like.
Thank you. Yes.
Or Stan, either way. My understanding is that it's upon delivery, but there's also conversation about potential amendments to try to ease that process and make sure it gets carried through.
Okay, so then their concerns were valid. I'd be interested in seeing how we can fix that, because it could create a true hardship, whereas it's going to look like somebody's trying to take advantage of a situation or something. So that would be great if we had a fix for that. Thank you.
Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was thinking on the same lines as our good Delegate Hartman and Buckle. I'd like to see 120 days. People in my district are just having a hard time. I mean, we've went from $2 a gallon to I think the last time I looked was like $4.30 a gallon. That's a lot of money. And, it's taken out of people can't afford to buy groceries. And, I believe we can, if we work on this, I think 120 days would be a great starting point. Thank you.
Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Johnson, for the bill. Just to sort of backtrack on to what Delegate Hartman was speaking about as well, and thinking about the implementation, I would prefer, a 90-day, because it will give the gas stations and consumers time to have the full advantage, of this tax break and help to our consumers, and would take away the concern of having to come back for a special session. So if we covered that particular time period, I think that would be a fair compromise, although I like Delegate Long's idea as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And, one other concern, and, obviously we can't solve national policy, but when we talk about, trying to get additional oil and supplies from Saudi Arabia and other countries, I think this really underlies the reason that we really need to be more fuel self-efficient. So I do appreciate the bill. I hope that we can talk about a further timeline, and thank you for presenting it.
Thank you, Delegate. And I couldn't agree more that we do need to take a look at how we can support ourselves as a country. And another reason for the 30 days is, don't forget, it's costing us $100 million every 30 days. So I thought 30 days would be a good cutoff point to say, hey, where are we now before we just keep extending $100 million a month that's going to cost our transportation fund and our general funds.
And I do appreciate that. Just as a quick follow-up, Madam Chair, I appreciate that. However, we are at a point in time in the state where we have $7.5 billion in a surplus. So while I know we can't just go out on a if you want to call it a wild spending spree, I think when people are really hurting, I think that's something that's, worth discussing. So, I think there's some options there, but thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle, and we do have two gentlemen with us from the Comptroller's office now that are on, if there are any questions that should be directed to them. Delegate Buckle?
Oh, that would be great. I just wanted, with what Delegate Johnson just said, is it my understanding that potentially the intent of this, because, it does have a fiscal impact of $90-some million a month estimated, depending on how many gallons are really purchased and how people's behavior changes because of the high prices. But is the intent of this that we would, in essence, backfill the money from the budgetary surplus we have? Because I do appreciate, some of the guys who testified earlier talking about, we want to do this, but we don't want to deprive money out of the Transportation Trust Fund. So is that your understanding, Delegate Johnson, that we would be able to effectively not really lose those funds? We just have to move them over from the surplus funds in order to accommodate this?
That is above my pay grade, Delegate. The governor certainly has an option to use those our surplus funds and backfill where necessary. You saw when we got some surplus funds before we repaid the rainy day fund. And I think we do have some flexibility to do some things that we need to do with this gas tax, including, if we need to, extending it.
I thank you for that. I mean, I hope that's the result that everybody comes to, that if we do this, we enact any form of holiday, that the losses to the Transportation Trust Funds and the other dedicated funds be replaced with some of the surplus funds. But because the folks are here from the Comptroller's office, maybe they can answer that question that I think myself and Delegate Hartman probably asked in a little more specialized way. How do we as a state implement the language in this bill that says that it's our intent as a legislature that this tax-free period will be reflected in the ultimate sale price for a gallon of gasoline? How do we monitor or enforce that the gas station essentially is reducing their base price by backing out the roughly 37 cents a gallon for consumers? If someone from the comptroller's office has an idea about that or can explain that process for us, how we regulate that, that would be great.
Good afternoon. I'm Chuck Alm. I'm the director of the Field Enforcement Bureau for the Comptroller's Office. The quick answer to your question is we do not have a mechanism to ensure that the retailer, in this case, would decrease their posted price by 36 cents, or their cost probably is more accurate. There's not a way to do that at this time.
So if your local Exxon Mobil was just like, hey, thanks, the price got cut at the wholesale level or the distributor level, but because we're concerned about whatever business concerns, we're concerned about increasing costs, this, that, the next thing, we're not going to come in and reduce it by 36 cents a gallon. There's really no way for us to monitor that or enforce it.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, of course, that's independent of this. Just in a natural environment with pricing, we don't have a mechanism to do that.
And the gas tax is on the gas tax isn't paid. I mean, it's ultimately paid by the consumer, but I guess it's not paid directly by the consumer. It's paid at higher up the food chain of the distribution process.
Yes, that's correct. In the purchase price, the consumer is actually paying the gas tax as a component of the price displayed on the dispenser, and same with the retailer who purchases the gasoline to resell at this location. He is in turn paying a delivered price to his supplier and is not carving out the gas tax separately.
So that's why we can't do it. It's not like just a sales tax on gas at the end consumer. There is a sales tax on gas. Is it still 6% or?
No, there's not a sales tax on motor fuel if it's got motor fuel tax on it. But you're exactly right. There's not a mechanism in place such as the sales and use tax. That's a perfect example.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Delegate Ludke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Olm, thank you for joining us. So a follow-up question to that. You said we don't have a mechanism. By we, I assume you mean the government, because I would assume that competition would push these gas retailers to reduce prices. As you saw, one retailer potentially decreasing its prices, consumers would naturally flock to that retailer because it's a significant gap. And that would, I would presume that just the operation of the free market would put downward pressure on prices.
You're exactly right. I mean, that's in a normal environment today, notwithstanding this particular provision in the past.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Delegate Long.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I was just curious, is it possible that instead of charging for the fuel, once it's picked up from, I guess they go to wherever to pick up these tankers, couldn't we give the tax credit at the pump just for this holiday? Instead of paying it when they pick the fuel up, have them collect the tax at the fuel pump. And I think it would be a little bit easier, in my opinion, to be able to document that. I'm just curious if you think that would work.
Yeah,
I'm just looking for a mechanism, that's all.
I think currently the retailers, and I'm talking about the gasoline stations, we're just going to generalize them as the retail service station dealers. They don't have any kind of mechanism now to report. They don't do a monthly report. So we would have to basically build a system so they could report whether it's whatever kind of tax. And I just think that would, especially with the timing associated with that, that would be a big problem. I think we're challenged just in developing a system to get this done in an expeditious manner. So, I mean, I appreciate that thought, but I just don't think that's possible.
Delegate Lasanti.
Thank you. And I guess my question is for the Comptroller's Office. I was reading the bill, and the definition of motor fuel is what? What does that actually include?
So the definition of motor fuel is gasoline or special fuel. Now, special fuel might confuse everybody, but
That's what I was trying to
Essentially,
get at.
special fuel is anything other than gasoline. It's that simple. So that can be used as a propulsion method in an internal combustion engine. So it can be your hydrogen, your propane, kerosene, fuel oil, electricity is carved out. I don't want to say that, but there's any other fuel.
So
that's used.
ethanol, LNG,
Yeah, that's
methane,
right. LNG.
biodiesel.
Exactly.
Okay, aviation
Biodiesel.
fuel, right? All that too. Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Committee, it looks like two folks who did not have audio may have audio, so I'm going to see if they want to testify now. Megan Owens for 2 minutes. Megan Owens. Okay. Mike Higgins.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on House Bill 1486. For the record, my name is Michael Higgins, and I am the chairman of the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association, along with being the general manager of Concrete General. First, I'd like to talk about a little bit about the impact of the recent spikes in the price of gas. We would appreciate seeing those numbers at the pump going down instead of up as much as anyone, but MTBMA simply objects to the Transportation Trust Fund, once again being the default slush fund that the state turns to in these kinds of situations. Our roads are crumbling and our bridges are unsafe, while the state is sitting on a current $7.5 billion surplus. By the state's own calculations, Maryland has $5.6 billion in deferred transportation maintenance. And that's just for needed repairs, not any new infrastructure projects. In addition, 48% of Maryland's major roads are in poor or mediocre condition, and 5% of our bridges are classified as poor or structurally deficient. We should be spending more money on roads and bridge construction, not cutting the revenues on which those projects depend. In 2014, the voters approved a lockbox on the Transportation Trust Fund to prevent against future raids of these funds. Although there may be promises to backfill any lost TTF revenues with general funds from the state surplus, we are concerned that this action effectively acts as a backdoor raid on the TTF that the lockbox provision cannot protect against, and that will serve as a dangerous precedent that future lawmakers may consider during times when there are actual budget challenges. To summarize, thank you for listening to us today and to me about this very important issue. I think our arguments hopefully have given you something to think about before you vote on this seemingly unstoppable train. For these reasons, I respectfully request an unfavorable vote on House Bill 1486 for unfavorable report. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Delegate Lukey.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins, can I just clarify for a second? Am I understanding your organization's position correctly that you're opposed to this even if the money is backfilled into the TTF?
Yes, we are. We feel that this is just a short-term gain for a long-term issue. The amount of revenue that this would be or amount of savings to us residents here in Maryland might be very minimal because we might not really even see the savings at the pump. To us, it would make more sense if we really want to do something to help the citizens here in Maryland.
Shuffle? He said I can ask them.
Is if we really want to do something to help the citizens here in Maryland, maybe we look at taking a 30-day break on the sales and use tax. That would really help all of us, not just the folks that either use gas or own vehicles here in Maryland. There's a lot of folks in Maryland that rely on mass transit to get to and from their places of business. They're being impacted by inflation and higher prices right now.
I appreciate it, Mr. Higgins. That's we heard those arguments earlier, but so you're opposed regardless is the point.
Correct.
Okay. Can I ask a question to Mr. Ward just for clarification, because aviation fuel was raised there a second ago. So my understanding is the bill as drafted does not affect aviation fuel at all. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'll try one more time. Megan Owings. Megan Owings. Okay, if there are no further questions, committee, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1486. Thank you, Delegate Johnson. And thank you to the members of the Comptroller's Office for being here today. And that concludes the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee. You just hang on for 1 minute while we come off the live stream.